Okay. Anyways, what were we doing? Oh yeah, we're gonna start the Jordan Peterson thing, right? Okay, let's start this up. PowerChat.live/Tyler Russell. If you guys are hanging out, support the stream with a Power Chat. Power Chat it up if you haven't already. Monday, Memorial Day. I'm working on a holiday, so let's hit the goal. Power Chat it up. And let's dive into our Jordan Peterson reaction to him getting owned by a bunch of libtards.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
Don't be a smartass.
Either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
You're really quite something, you are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him. Hello there. I'm Dr. Jordan Peterson. I'm a clinical psychologist, a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto, an author, a podcaster, public speaker, and today I'm surrounded by 25 atheists. My first claim, atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting.
Damn.
Good afternoon,
Lots
Dr.
of people want to
Peterson.
go for that
How you
one.
doing?
So this claim here that atheists don't know what they're rejecting. My background is in studying to become a traditional Catholic priest, daily mass, daily rosary, going on long retreats, deep into the magisterium and biblical hermeneutics, like I was thoroughly in it. And it seems like I do know what I'm missing. Is there something that I missed over years of study, both this issue formally and living out religion so deeply?
Well, you obviously feel that you missed something when you were practicing for the priesthood. Your aim was off then. So
And
there's
so-
always the possibility that it's still off now.
What was off about my aim in the first place?
I don't know. That might take a long time to figure out. But
Then it seems kind of like this no true Scotsman type of fallacy in which you're the arbiter of people's aims and how they understand those aims to be. How is it that you can claim that people don't know something that you know about their life despite not having met them?
well, it's obviously a generic claim, just like the atheist claim that there's no God is
Yeah.
a generic claim. In your case, it would have to be specified more, and I'm not claiming to understand what was going on in your mind, but
Yeah.
my experience with atheists is twofold. Is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak, and that's left
Yeah.
them with an animus.
But I think that you have a reductive view of what atheism is. You've defined religion so broadly to include any sort of having aim in life, any sort of cultural archetypes, or having a metaphorical substrate. And atheism to you is a very specific type of like three people in the world that are these Raskolnikov type of, they want to get away with a perfect murder. It seems like you have the reductive view of what an atheist is.
Well, let's start with your claim. How do you define the God that you're rejecting? Like, what is God to you? You studied in the church, you found that unsatisfactory. How would you characterize what you rejected?
I think the average Christian believer, when they say that they're Christian and they believe, they mean some sort of God that is all-powerful, all-perfect, is somehow involved in the matters of this world, and that we look to them through wisdom and with the Logos incarnate in Christ. And it also seems like you don't believe in religion in the way that the average Christian says that they believe in religion. And there are as many gods out there as there are believers, because everybody has mutually exclusive and different views of what God is. So it seems
Well,
like...
if everybody had mutually exclusive views of what God is, no one could speak to each other. The mere fact of
Yeah, that's
communication
not true.
presumes a commonality of assumption and definition. And it's certainly not the case that I regard any archetypal manifestation whatsoever as equally religious.
Atheism is
So that's
retarded
not
and
a-
anti-intellectual
that's
at
not a real
every
claim.
level. I
Let
agree.
me give you an example. For
Precisely.
example, there's a sub-narrative in the story of Moses where Moses is rewarded with a glimpse of God. Okay, and that's one of the ways that God is characterized in the Old Testament stories.
Yes.
Now, Moses is a faithful servant of God and a good man. At least that's the case within the confines of the story.
One possible
It's
interpretation.
the case within the confines of the story, obviously. What,
Well,
there's
not
a-
obviously.
there's,
When we look at the Bible can't precisely say anything because there are so many different exegetical and hermeneutic views of this particular book, and that everybody has agreed everybody has disagreed historically on, it seems like, even the most benign detail about a book this big. And it seems like you can only say that the Bible says something if you first presuppose that it's univocal.
So your claim essentially is that Moses in the Old Testament plays the role of a villain or is irrelevant? Because the alternative claim
I'm
is
saying that we
he's
can't
good.
know because we can't talk to those authors.
If you are going to start with the presupposition that there's nothing I can say about any of these stories that you're not going to disagree with from the perspective that there are multiple potential competing claims, then I can't speak with you. So
and we also have a short time here, so I want to get to the core of what you're arguing here, and I'd love if we could.
The core of what I'm arguing is that atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. So I'm trying to give you an example of what's being rejected and its complexity. Okay, so God rewards Moses with a glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
A possible one.
I said I didn't say the. I said
He's already getting triggered. That's possible, crazy.
Yes.
Okay. So despite the fact that Moses is a stellar character and he's had a long and
Bro's getting rattled, not even done the first question.
Difficulty and travail, God puts him between two cliffs so he can just see a crack of what's in front of him. And when God walks by, he allows him to see his back. Okay, so the implication of that story is that the divine is fundamentally unknowable.
Peterson is so angry all the time. He is a very angry man, isn't he?
People in their finitude
very
have
angry.
to be shielded from a comprehensive vision of the basis of reality. Well, that's not the God that's defined in that manner, right? It's not a simple personification. It's not a simple old man in the sky. It's something that in its essence is unknowable and overwhelming. And that isn't, in my experience, the God that's defined by atheists who are attempting to undermine the story.
Damn, they get like 15 minutes to debate
for
now?
example, that you're a finite creature.
In these older in the older versions of this, I thought that they only got like 3 minutes. Unless that timer is for the entire segment. That could be for the entire segment, I guess.
And that you face something that in the final analysis is unknowable.
In that segment.
And that you have to establish a relationship with it, regardless of your inability to perceive or even withstand perceiving the whole. Okay, is there a problem with that?
I mean, the problem is that when we look at, famously, when you've been asked, do you believe in God? The question becomes, what do we mean by God? And in the Bible, it's not even clear the biblical authors know what God is, because Yahweh has historically emerged from an early storm god, a deity that doesn't exhaust the category of deity, and that has changed over the Old Testament. Does God have physicality? Does God not have physicality? It seems like, yes, if you define religion to mean anybody that has an aim, anybody that looks at the unknown, anybody who wants to go from chaos to order is inherently religious, then yes. But also in the same way, I could define atheist as somebody who doesn't dogmatically believe in a religion, or somebody who doesn't regularly attend religious services or belong to a denomination. To help especially the audience kind of like boil this down, there was a lot of words there. That the central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
A central claim.
A central claim is that we exist somewhere between the finite and the infinite.
No, I said that we were finite and we had to establish a relationship with the infinite.
Yeah, then in that case, then we're all religious, but then I can do the same thing and define one particular element of atheism. It seems like we both have a reductive view of what the other side looks like, to the point where a conversation seems incoherent, and not just incoherent, but not in the way that the average Christian understands Christianity to be.
Do you have a problem?
Let's pause there. Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority.
Bro got voted out, voted off the island. Who's next?
How's it going? Nice to meet you.
This guy, okay.
David.
David, good to see you.
Tell me everything that you know about the Polynesian deity Lono, L-O-N-O.
I don't know anything about the Polynesian deity Lono.
So you're rejecting something without knowledge of what you're rejecting.
I'm not rejecting it. No more than I'm rejecting anything that I don't know anything about.
Do you believe in Lono? Do you believe that he is a deity that exists in the world, exists in the universe, that exists in the existence of everything? Do you believe that Lono is a being?
I'll answer that question once you answer my question, which is, do I reject everything that I'm ignorant of? Because that's your presupposition that undergirds your argument, and unless you can prove that that's
valid. Do you reject the flying spaghetti monster? Guys, do you guys reject the flying spaghetti monster? Yeah, you do? Well, you don't even know what that is. Got your ass. Like, what? Get the fuck out of here, fucking retard. Atheists really think that this is like a talking point? oh, you instantly reject some preposterous claim. Got ya. Like, God isn't a preposterous claim. Like, it's dude, it's the equivalent of being like, you see this this iced Dunkin' latte cup? I'm saying that this is God. Do you reject that? Like, give me a fucking break. Obviously, I reject it. Well, how do you know? It's the fucking stupidest argument ever.
Quite simple.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's formulated accurately.
Do you believe that Lono exists?
Yes Adam green coded. Yeah, extremely Adam green coded.
I'm not going to answer that question for the reasons I just described. You already insisted that if I reject something, that if I'm ignorant of something, I reject it. Do you think that everyone in the world has to know everything simultaneously for that to be valid and true?
I think in order for your argument to be true, in order for it to be true that we atheists don't understand what we're rejecting, then you need to also apply that to yourself and to Christians and to Muslims and to any other person on this earth, where if you don't understand what you're rejecting the belief in, then you can't reject the belief in it. That's the implication of your claim.
I didn't say that I rejected the belief in Lona. I said I didn't know who Lono was. I didn't say anything about rejecting.
That's because I've asked you several times and you haven't. But let me get to my even greater point.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying atheists don't understand what religion is or what God is in order to be able to reject it fully or completely. We have someone over here who studied it in their own way. I've studied religion. I have a degree in religious studies, specialty in Christianity and Mediterranean traditions. And further than that, beyond me, Pew Research studies suggest that atheists and agnostics actually know more about religion and about religious stories, the foundational principles, than believers.
Because they're more religious than they think they are.
Okay.
Yeah, because they go on r/atheism and they become debunkers. I totally believe that. I 110% believe that in recent years, atheists would on average know more like facts or like random knowledge about religion than religious people. Because like going to church and stuff, you're not like studying, you're not like studying. Where all these like Redditors, they sit here and they read their Pew Research and they study it to debunk it, right? So I would believe that, but it's because they're all like r/atheism participants.
They're concerned with deep matters, and one of the defining characteristics of someone who's oriented in a religious direction is that they're concerned with deep matters.
Okay.
In fact, it's virtually definitional.
Right, but they also have to identify with a religious tradition and accept the foundational stories that go along with that.
Well, that would mean more that they're sectarian than that they're religious. And most people, for example, in the United States, deny that they're religious but accept that they're spiritual.
Let's pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
Bro got voted out.
Aha!
Bro said, aha.
Hi, nice to meet you.
How are you doing?
Good, how
What's
are you?
your name?
I'm Greg. Nice to meet you.
Greg.
Okay, so I feel like you're getting at this idea of polysemy, where we have multiple related meanings for a word, right? Like, for example, a famous painting can be emotionally moving in that it changes my emotional state. And when I was on the highway coming here to the studio, I was physically moving.
Said,
I was changing my
huzzah.
position. If I said, I believe the Mona Lisa is very moving, and you said, you don't really understand what you're saying, it's nailed to the wall, I would say that you're the one who doesn't understand what I'm saying, not the other way around. And the way that relates to this is there are many concepts of God, and I'll admit, I find a lot of what you say about that interesting. I'm familiar with it. The idea of this kind of Jungian hierarchical thing, or as a metaphor or a symbol, or the kind of, atheist, materialist, literalist idea of a agentic, omnipotent, omniscient being that intervenes in reality, right? So when I'm saying that I reject the concept of God, I'm aware of these other definitions of God. But I think that when we use words, we tend to only imply one meaning at a time. So the same way that I would say the Mona Lisa is moving emotionally, but I would not say it's moving physically. I would say I reject the concept of God in this very literal way. But
What literal way?
the way that God is this omniscient, omnipotent, agentic, supernatural being that sent his son down and has, caused miracles and all these things like that. The idea of God is
Do you
like...
think that there's an underlying unity of things?
Could you explain that question?
Well, scientists, for example, believe that science unifies in a comprehensive theory. Do you, yes, no, or that
I know
there are
that people-
multiple competing truths? Those are the options. Either things unify or there are multiple competing truths.
I think that, I know that, for example, like in physics, people are looking for like a theory of everything.
And why do you think they're doing that?
It's interesting, it's helpful.
But they also believe that there's an underlying unity to things.
In a sense, yeah, like like the material world and time and space are probably governed by universal laws and principles?
Partly that, yes, yes, but that the same thing might extend to a broader domain that would include imagination and value.
Could you help me connect that to the prompt?
Well, I'm trying to define God, the God
Yeah.
that I don't think atheists do a very good job of defining. Here's another question for you. What do you think guides you in your determination of whether or not what you're saying to me is true?
Can we go back, can we stay on what we were talking about?
We are.
Okay.
You're just uncomfortable with the question.
No, I feel like you're just kind of throwing different spaghetti at the wall.
I'm not.
Okay.
I asked
All right.
you a very specific question.
Spaghetti at the wall?
What is it that
Why
you
do
think
atheists love
guides you
spaghetti
when
so
you're
much?
talking to me to help you determine whether what you say is true?
Logic, memory, reasoning, sensory information.
How do you distinguish that from being governed by something that's false?
An interesting question.
How do you know the difference when you speak between what's true and what's false? So you could
I
imagine
infer, right? I can infer. I can.
from what principles?
So, and what are you getting at?
I'm getting at the fact that your conscience guides you. Is that
Okay.
reasonable?
Conscious is defined by
Conscience.
my empathy and my reason are my foundational.
Define it any way you want.
Okay, so that's how I'm defining my conscience. Is my my conscience is my sense of.
I don't like this guy's
Right
voice.
and
Right and
wrong.
wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Where
Yeah,
does
yeah.
that
The
come from?
nasally Reddit
I would say
voice
that comes
is very
from
disturbing
an
to me.
evolved capacity to empathize and a recognition of the benefits of engaging with and nurturing that capacity. And then that empathy is constrained and guided by reason, right? Like, for example, I am driving down the highway, there's a kitten in the road. I'm going to empathetically feel, oh my God, I want to save the kitten. But then reasonably, like, I'm going to get hit by a car, right? So that's sort of the process through which I make ethical decisions.
Okay,
is
how do
empathy
you-
constrained by reason?
Do you think that people can differ in their response to something empathically?
Yeah. Like,
Is there a mediating principle that can tell you one person who's empathic and another person who's empathic that disagree, who's correct?
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we'd have to, talk it out, right? We do that in real life all the time when we have, whether that's a discussion with a friend about the right thing to do in a situation, whether that's a policy discussion about law, right? That's where we can converse with each other, think about things, explain our perspectives, and then kind of reach a conclusion, right? That I think that we do that all the time.
So Elijah, the prophet Elijah, defined God in the Old Testament as the voice of conscience within.
Okay.
That's a definition.
So you're saying by that definition of God, I see this kind of goes back to where I'm saying initially.
I'm
where,
not defining it. Elijah
Okay,
defined
so
it.
as Elijah defines
It's
God.
defined that way in Jonah, too.
Okay, so as
Cardinal Newman also
got
defined it that
as,
way.
as I'm sure you know many people who've defined it that way, and it's impressive. You're a very knowledgeable person.
I'm not trying to be impressive. I'm
okay.
just pointing out to you
Got
how
it.
God is defined in the Old
Okay.
Testament.
All right. So to respond to that, I do think
Peterson is,
there are
like,
lots
really
of interesting
snarky, isn't he?
ways to define God, and that goes back to my
Then
kind
we-
of
then
opening
how do
I
statement.
mean, I don't really
specify
mind it
what
because he's
we're
being snarky
arguing
towards
about.
atheists.
We use
but
context clues, or
regardless, it's very
again, it goes
snarky.
back to my example of the
I'm
Mona Lisa.
defining God as conscience.
Okay, so that's interesting, but then you're kind of expanding the meaning of
No,
God.
I'm not. That's how it's defined in the Old Testament.
Okay,
in
so-
Elijah and in Jonah.
Sure. So whoever, so some.
It's not whoever.
Okay.
Elijah is one of the
Okay.
major
All right.
Old Testament
All right.
prophets.
All
Right?
right.
He's equal in stature to Moses.
Okay.
Right. So it's not arbitrary.
All right. So that is interesting, but it's not relevant to the context with which I am using the term God.
It's directly relevant. Atheists reject God, but they don't
Right, but
understand what they're rejecting.
you're
You
being-
accept conscience as a guide, and conscience is one of the defining characteristics of God in the Old Testament.
I think you're being intellectually
Parker's there.
disingenuous.
Is that's
In what
Parker,
way?
right? That guy's name.
Because
I
again,
asked you if you believe that conscience guided you.
You just asked me a question and then you stopped me from answering it. In this setting, you understand the way I am using the term God and belief.
Not
and
in
then
the least. I don't understand how you're using it in the least. That's why I'm trying to define it. My definition of God as conscience is a lot more precise and oriented than your definition of the God that you
But
hypothetically disbelieve in.
it's irrelevant to the fault lines of this debate.
How is it irrelevant?
Because in common parlance, when we're talking about atheists, God, belief, not belief,
I
we're
don't
not
care
talking.
about common parlance. I'm trying to get to something fundamental.
I think your point is irrelevant to the way that people tend
Which
to use
point?
these words. Your point that there are these polysemous
I didn't make
ideas
that
of God.
point. You did.
I did. Well, I
made a
I
specific
characterized
point
it,
that God was associated with conscience.
I just feel like you kind of retreat into this semantic fog.
I'm not retreating at all. I'm advancing, sir. You are retreating.
All right. Well, it was very nice to meet you.
Nice
I appreciate
to meet
the
you too.
conversation.
Yeah. It's very brave of you to do this.
Thank you.
My next claim is that morality and purpose cannot be found
That first
within
segment was
science.
The atheists aren't sending their best. What does this claim? Morality and purpose cannot
Mr.
be found
Canada.
within
How you doing,
science.
man?
I'm doing great.
What's
How are
your
you?
name?
Brian. I think it's interesting that you say that morality and purpose can't be found in science. Actually,
No, within science.
sure.
Yeah.
Purpose, I actually grant you, because purpose is subjective, right? Unless you want to boil it down to the purpose of life is just to procreate, right? Sure, whatever. Morality is actually something that we do see. We actually have examples of Neanderthals and older individuals found in a tribe, missing an arm, missing teeth, still alive somehow in his 40s, 50s, right? Typically, you're a Neanderthal, you can't eat, you can't hunt, you die, right? But we know that members of his tribe were taking care of him, right? So we know that at some level, early in our evolutionary history,
He's very shiny,
we
yes.
actually developed altruism.
He's
We
very
have examples
shiny.
of chimpanzees who actually have a basic understanding of fairness, right? If you give a chimpanzee 2 grapes, right, and his buddy gets 3, right? He actually freaks out, right? But you give both chimps 3 grapes and they're good. We have examples of parrots. I think
Except
it's
for the
parrots.
greedy chimps.
Except for the greedy chimps.
They want 4 grapes.
They want 4 grapes. You know, those do exist, right? But we have similar examples where we do animal tests, right? And
So morality is intrinsic.
I think
So it precedes science.
that actually
right?
a better way to define it would be that social animals, which we are, right,
Yeah.
require some level of morality or
Into what? I'm not disagreeing.
Sure.
Why do they require that?
because it's the only way that social groups can actually survive, right?
That's my point with
Sure.
regards to science. Thank you very much.
Is that
Precisely the point that you just made, that science has to exist within a moral framework that isn't in itself scientific.
how's that not scientific?
Well, because it's not derived from the scientific process, as you just
It
indicated.
doesn't
by
need to derive
pointing
from the
to-
scientific process.
Well,
It's
hang
the
on,
fact that
hang on a sec.
we are social animals, and we need that to exist as a group.
I
right?
agree, but
Sure.
you pointed to the morality of Neanderthals, to the morality of chimpanzees. They didn't derive that from science.
They don't need to. That's not how
That's
that
my
works.
point.
Science explains it. So you
No,
just,
science doesn't explain morality.
it doesn't explain how social animals would need to be.
Well, that's a
altruistic.
complicated question.
Catholic
But we
Anon says
see
he
it,
thinks
though.
observing altruism
Yeah,
in
but
animals means
explaining
science
the
means moral
evolution of
principles.
morality
Yep.
and explaining morality itself aren't the same thing.
Okay, so you're asking why does this happen?
Yes, that's more accurate.
Because we're
I'm-
social animals.
Yeah,
we
the
but
need
black
to-
there's
guy's just
more to
talking
it than
about
that.
observing it.
Sure. For example, so we're moral animals that have a sense of the future.
Sure.
Okay, that makes us unique, and that structures our morality.
No, actually, there are other animals that can predict the future, or not,
Not
predict
really.
the future. No, tigers. Actually, there was a tiger at the SF Zoo that killed somebody, and so
Hunting
actually,
animals. Look,
no. Kids threw shit at the tiger. The tiger actually plotted its escape, and it found the
I'm not
kids.
saying that animals can't think.
Okay.
No, but
let's
they can
pause here.
perceive the future.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Well-
Voted out by the majority.
Thank you, man.
Good man. Yeah.
Jordan Peterson. How you
Yeah,
doing?
that black guy
doing?
wasn't
Luke. Nice to meet you.
really a match.
So your claim that morality and purpose can only be found in science is
Wow,
a little
voted out
shaky
the
'cause
black
I
guy
think that your
racist.
claim is really
All
being
these
framed
atheists
to
are
be
racist,
morality
dude.
and purpose can only be found in religion. Is that how you're kind of framing it?
I would say that the domain of religion is the domain of morality and purpose. Yes, exactly. And also that science is actually structured, at least in part technically, to eliminate such considerations from its purview a priori.
Okay.
Right? That's why we define science as value-free. But that has to be wrong because scientists have to prioritize their attention towards something before they can even engage in observation.
Okay.
And that act of prioritization of attention is a value-predicated act. And so I can continue. There's all sorts of things we have to assume about science before it can take place.
Okay, so what I'm specifically pointing out here is about religion in particular, since you yourself are a Christian, right?
People debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
Okay, I understand that. And me, myself, I am a former young earth creationist fundamentalist.
Oh, yeah.
So I have experience in this. I used to run a TikTok channel directed about apologetics about the Bible, specifically in this type of facet with morality, evolution and such, and going back and forth with that. So in the Bible, it talks a lot about slavery, right?
Yes.
Yes. So in that, it teaches you how to take care of a slave. Rather than saying slavery is wrong, I think
No,
it
it
should
says
say
that in the story of Moses.
It says slavery is incorrect. It says
Well,
it's immoral.
that's why Moses leads his people away from slavery.
But why does the Bible predicate and tell people exactly how to take care of a slave? Isn't that
Well,
immoral? Wouldn't you say that culturally we've evolved as a species, as he said earlier about empathy?
Yeah, I would say that the reason we evolved, so to speak, away from slavery was because the West was founded on Judeo-Christian morality and the presumption that every person was made in the image of God.
Wouldn't you
And so
say that
slavery itself became immoral, and that was established by Protestant Christians in
Okay,
the UK.
I'm curious, chat. I'm curious as to what you guys watching think. How many of you guys, because I know, like, there are young Earth creationist groypers. I'm not. But do we have any young Earthers in the chat? Any creationists young Earth creationists? Dinosaurs are fakes is pray for yay. Like anybody believe that the Earth is like 6,000 years old? Yo.
Dalton Clodfelter bot sent $5. The girl in the brown dress has no bra.
Okay, thank you, Dalton Clodfelter's bot. I appreciate the 5, buddy. I appreciate the 5. I didn't even notice that. Thank you for pointing that out. Be like Dalton Clodfelter's bot. Power chatted up. Skisser John says, I don't have an opinion either way. Yes, I believe it. 10,000 years old, says Keds. I don't know where I stand on that, TBH. Yeah, the Earth is 10k years old. Max is Sunny. I'm not, says Cozy Dissident. Yeah, my belief is, I think that the Earth is billions of years old. I do believe that the universe was created by God, but hundreds of millions is retarded. Okay, chill. Okay. I don't really believe in the young Earth creationism thing of 6 to 10,000 years. I don't believe in like the Big Bang though. I think that the Big Bang is nonsense. The Big Bang is just like, oh, we can't explain it, so we're just going to say this. But I mean, like, I'm open to having my mind changed about it. But just Jimmy says, I believe in the Big Bang Theory, which I'm pretty sure was thought up by a Catholic. I don't know if that was thought by a Catholic or not. In my opinion, I think that the Big Bang is just kind of a placeholder. It's a very easy way to explain the creation of the universe. The Big Bang literally proves God exists. I mean, Yeah, like if the Big Bang is real, I just think that God made the Big Bang then. But I don't know if I fully subscribe to the Big Bang as like there was just a big explosion. I just think that God just made the universe. Um Do you believe in dinosaurs, this far Plaster? I do. Yes. I do believe in dinosaurs. Yes, the theorists behind the Big Bang use it as proof for God. That's a dub then. I think that it's I think it's a very simplistic placeholder to explain it away. It might be real that there was a bang, but I just feel like it's a placeholder for saying that God just created the universe. That makes sense? Dinos were probably wiped out in the flood. I think that dinosaurs died due to the asteroid. Am I just a libtard? Am I just a fucking libtard? Do I believe that humans evolved from apes? That's the main question. I do believe in evolution. You guys are just gonna call me libtarded, but I do believe in evolution. Big Bang was made by a Catholic priest. It proves a beginning to the universe, taking away claim the universe is eternal. Dinosaurs died once we figured out how to defeat the giants. Oh yeah. What do you guys think about the giants? The Nephilim. In Florida, you guys know Nick Stumphauser? Nick Stumphauser would talk about the Nephilim and how mountains were just like tree stumps. I'm not gonna lie, he came kind of close to not convincing me that mountains were tree stumps, but convincing me that like giants and elves and goblins they all existed. The classic stump theories. How'd this get us to Agartha? See, now I don't know what I think about Agartha. I go back and forth when it comes to Agartha, dude. No, not about the mountains being tree stumps. About there being that was the separate thing. About there being giants and goblins and elves and dwarves. Dragons? Hmm. Do I believe in dragons? I would lean towards yes. I would lean towards yes on the dragon question. I don't really I haven't really like done a lot of research on that stuff though. We're supposed to just believe that everyone on the face of the earth was just lying about dragons. True. Did Stumphauser make you a Peter too? He tried. He tried to make me a Peter, but I never gave in. Although I try some of the Peter stuff every now and again, but I never became a full-on Peter. Let's see here. Is there proof that dragons were real? Oh, we got a Joe Rogan clip. Real dragon caught on camera? Damn. I'm convinced. Why don't you guys just show me that video? They literally caught a dragon on camera. Why didn't you just send that in? I would have instantly believed in it. I would have instantly believed that dragons were real if you guys just said that or sent that in.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
So you like these kind of far out there ideas. How do you like this idea? There's a group of people that say that dragons were real, and I'll explain.
Ooh.
So around the same time period, so to speak, and I'm not one of these people, so I'm probably going to get the details wrong
like
a little
Matthew
bit.
McConaughey movie right now.
Yeah, seriously. But so around the same time period in China, South America, Africa, all these different Rome, all these places, images depicted people fighting dragons, right? And every dragon was slightly different, but it was all a giant scaly animal that could fly. So when you break that down, you think about the fact that large birds had a hard time being fossilized because their bones are so porous, right? So because bones, they have like hollowish bones.
Could have been done with high-tech wizardry and scissors and glue. So true, Karasu. No, that was real. That was a real dragon.
They break down very easily and they don't fossilize. So the group that says this, basically they're saying the evidence is the reason there's no fossils of dragons is because they had bird bones and they were actually very delicate animals. But a handful of these small population of these giant flying lizards existed and basically encompassed all these different countries where they all depicted fighting dragons in their own way, and they were all killed off by knights or whatever it is, and then didn't fossilize.
What?
So it's like the science is saying that if there were lizards big enough to fly around and eat people, they didn't have bones that could fossilize.
So it'd be like an eagle.
Right. And that's why all these human populations around the world have depictions of them, because they did actually exist.
Now, are there any stories of dragons written in the times of people that they actually had the written word, or is it just depictions?
I don't know. Not my field.
That would be interesting because are these depictions ancient accounts told by generation after generation, passed down?
I think so. I don't know. I don't know anything about dragons or whether it's real, but I think it's interesting to think, oh, well, the science supports that if there were flying lizards, their bones wouldn't have fossilized, and these have been passed down, stories that have been exaggerated and passed down from generation to generation.
And some of them breathe fire, but some of them don't, depending upon
which culture it was significant to.
I wonder what the fire is supposed to represent. Or they're just people are full of shit.
Probably that one.
Yeah, it's probably made it sound even cooler.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Not only did I kill him, he was trying to burn me. Do you hold any weight? Do you think that holds any weight?
No.
There's actually dragons?
I mean, we know there were large flying lizards during the times of dinosaurs, right? The only weight that it could possibly hold is that a few of those somehow survived much later than we previously thought. But do I think that there were dragons attacking human beings and civilizations? No, I don't. But it's still interesting.
It's so much cooler if there were.
Right.
And like the fact that we know that pterodactyls did exist, that's cool.
Right.
It would be way cooler as if they existed with people.
Right, 2,000 years ago.
Why is that? But why is that so much cooler to us?
I don't know.
It's like I mean,
Bruh, is Cozy down? Did Cozy just drop? It's over. Cozy is over. Chat. Or is my internet about to go down? No, I'm still live on Kick. Okay. Cozy is done. It's over. The Kick chat won. Damn, the Kick chat won, dude. Cozy is over. Total Cozy death. Damn. Well, hey, all the Coziers just should have gotten on Kick. Well, they could have. They should have all just gotten on Kick, dude. Kickers and Rumblers won. Let me just see. Is it going to come back? Oh, are we back? Cozy is back. Right? Yeah, it's back. Okay. It is back. Boom. Okay. PowerChat.live/Tyler Russell. If you guys are hanging out, support the stream with the Power Chat. Power Chat it up. We got to hit the goal. You guys got to start hitting that Power Chat button.
People would dedicate giant chunks of their life trying to find out if pterodactyls did coexist with human beings at one point in time. They really would.
Absolutely.
Imagine if there was like 100.
That totally makes sense to me. I would like to talk to somebody about dragons. You guys were saying that Mio knows a lot about it. I could be convinced that dragons are real for sure.
Foot pterodactyl snatching kids.
It makes sense.
Terrifying.
Oh my god.
Would you know about the Moa eagle?
Yeah, the Haast eagle.
The Haast, exactly.
Yeah.
So I call it Moa eagle because they used to attack Moas.
They
with
weren't
the Haast
that
eagle.
big.
No, but they did supposedly snatch Maori children. Yeah.
But when I Googled it, I remember I think the large ones were like 40 pounds or something like that. I don't think they were that big.
Is that all it is?
Yeah, like an eagle is really light.
Right, but their wingspan is still enormous. Yeah,
I mean they have incredible power. Like when you see an eagle snatch a salmon with its claws and fly away with this 10-pound salmon,
right?
And I mean that's insane.
It is,
because that salmon probably weighs more than it.
Right.
Like birds are weird, right? They sit on you like, oh, you're not very heavy.
No, they don't weigh anything. And again, that goes back to that whole hollow bone type thing.
Right. That's why chickens are strange because they're fat.
Yeah.
They weigh a lot. Like you pick up a chicken, you're like, you fat fuck, you can't even fly. But bird, like a hawk, fairly light.
Yeah.
For what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think was the biggest Haast eagle. How big was the Haast eagle? But they were hunted by people.
Right.
Because they posed a threat. Right?
And because people hunted the moa to extinction, that giant bird.
Thoughts on Hollow Earth, Chad? Do you guys believe in Hollow Earth at all? Hollow Earth is something that I think I could get into. I could totally see that being real to an extent. I don't think that there's like a whole other like society living in Earth. But I think that there could totally be like an opening in Antarctica that goes inside. The Nazis were going for it. I totally believe that the Nazis were trying to find the Hollow Earth. I don't believe that the Earth is flat, though. We definitely have some flat earthers in chat, right? Yeah, I don't believe that the Earth is flat. read Admiral Byrd's account of his recon over Antarctica. I did way back in the day, like when I was a teenager. So I forget a lot of that like verbatim, but I know the gist of it. Yeah, I read the Admiral Byrd stuff as a teenager. You can literally fly across the Pacific. Yeah. What does that mean? Are people saying that you can't fly across the Pacific? If the Earth is flat and hollow, does that mean that the inner Earth is just the bottom? Well, flat earthers, they don't think that it's just like a 2D plane, right? They think that it's like thicker, like it's like a thicker crust with a firmament over top. So it would just be like underground, still within the flat earth realm. What is hollow earth? Hollow earth is just that it depends on different people's interpretation. But basically that at the poles, specifically Antarctica, that there's like an opening. And like that's why you can't go to Antarctica and stuff, because there's an opening there that leads into the inside of the Earth's crust. That is like another civilization or just like another landmass. And some people say that it has its own sun in there. Other people say that it has to do with it being so far underground that the core of the Earth keeps it a good temperature so that people can live. Some people say that there's like a higher society there. Other people just think it's just like a new land. But it's just that the Earth is hollow, that you can go inside the Earth and there's more landmass. I had a friend that thought I was insane because I thought the towers were controlled demolition, but he believed in Hollow Earth, LOL. Yeah, that's kind of crazy to believe in Hollow Earth and not 9/11 conspiracies. But that also just goes to show how tight the grip is on some of these Jewish power topics when it comes to the media. The fact that somebody can be like fully convinced of Hollow Earth but not 9/11 conspiracies. Brain absolutely zapped by Zog, dude. They really thought Journey to the Center of the Earth was a documentary, huh? Exactly. Well, that's what that's based on. It's based on Hollow Earth. Hollow Earth theory. Yeah, the Admiral Byrd stuff is really, really interesting. I've always had this idea, like if you had like unlimited funds, now that we have Starlink, like we need somebody to get a bunch of Starlink and just take the Admiral Byrd route and go find the center of the Earth and then like go find the hole. You know, like somebody just needs to do an IRL live stream like that. Take the journey down there. If you get intercepted by beds or whatever at Antarctica, then that's still content, dude. It's all going to be live streamed, you know, like. But somebody's got to try. Somebody's got to try to Admiral Byrd it up. I feel like there could be large caves deep underground, but I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of what I would interpret it as, right? Is like there's a hole in Antarctica, in the continent that is Antarctica, that it's just like a really big, deep cavern that leads to an open area. And there's probably vegetation down there if it does exist. But I don't think that there's like another like sun in the hollow, you know. If I did believe in it, believe in it. It would just be like, oh, because it's closer to the Earth's core, that it keeps it a living temperature. But it's always interested me. It's always been a very interesting conspiracy theory, even if it's Clandis ovens coded.
Who then convinced the UK government?
Okay, that was a crazy segue. Let's continue with the Jordan Peterson content. That was a crazy segue, but that was a
you
fun
say
segue.
that this is about the cultural evolution of humans in general, rather than just Christianity.
No, I think it's the flowering of the ideas that were embedded in the biblical texts across long spans of time.
I feel like this is just humans editing based on the cultural evolution of
What do you mean
morality.
by just?
Just?
Yeah, just humans.
Well, humans.
Editing.
Well, based on culture.
Hey, and powerchat.live/Tyler Russell. If you haven't paid up your Tyler tax already, now is the time. So power chat it up. Powerchat.live/Tyler Russell.
And history, right? We get better.
Well, they did do it based on culture and history, but culture and history have their foundations too. So.
Well, yeah, but we're talking about slavery. So many people bolstered it based on the Bible. Based on the Bible. They looked at it and they justified it in the United States in the Deep South. They justified slavery.
Yeah, but
based
the main thrust of Protestant thought in particular was stringently against slavery, and it was about the only movement in the history of the human race that had an anti-slavery direction.
Which was driven by humans and their understanding
that's one
of
way
morality.
of looking at it. Well, it depends.
It's the same with women's suffrage. I mean, women's in the patriarchy.
What do you mean it was driven by humans? Humans drove slavery too.
Yes, exactly.
So there's no argument there. If slavery and anti-slavery were both driven by humans, what does your claim that they were driven by humans have to do with it?
Evolving morality based on the culture that within the society that they live in.
Gimbo says, I don't know all these conspiracy theories. You should do a stream one day talking about these fun conspiracy theories. We did a little bit on Future Nation, or not on Futurecast, rather, with like Beardson and Dalton and stuff. I feel like when we do panel streams, it always inevitably comes up. It's just a fun little topic.
With women's suffrage as well is a very similar topic in the Bible. There are denominations in Christianity, such as Pentecostal movement, which do bolster women to be pastors, right? Which I think that's a great thing to do. But most like to disregard
Where do you
women.
think the idea that human beings were sufficiently equal to all vote and not be slaves came from?
Humans.
Yeah, but so did the idea of slavery.
So did the idea of God.
Fine, but what's your point? Like, you're not making an argument. You're just saying all thoughts come from humans, regardless of the thoughts.
It's not driven by a higher power. It's driven on our experiences as humans, which is what is best for all people.
Is it driven by conscience?
It could be. Which conscience is also something that has evolved over time. And I think that's something that does evolve in morality and empathy.
Okay, I don't understand the point that you're making.
My point is that God influenced slavery. People looked at the Bible and went, this is moral because God says so. Just like women's suffrage.
There's lots
and just like homosexuality.
All human societies were slave owning. So you can't blame that on the Bible.
If humanity decided...
Oh, wait, address that first.
What,
all
about slavery?
Human societies were slavers. So you can't blame that on the Bible.
Well, you can say it bolstered it.
Well, not if you look at the broad sweep of history, because it was the Protestant Christians
based on their
UK.
interpretation of the Bible.
It was the Protestant Christians.
Which evolves over time.
Let's pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
All right. Well, it was great talking with you,
nice
sir.
talking to you, too.
Dr. Peterson?
Good to see you, man.
Yo!
Anonymous sent $5.
Yo, thank you for the 5, buddy. I appreciate it. W. Joe? W. Joe song? W. Joe? Let's freaking go. Be like Anonymous. PowerChat.live/Tyler Russell if you're hanging out. Support the stream with the Power Chat. Well, this plays, we'll take a quick look at the TL. That was Fart Blaster. Thank you, Fart Blaster. Insurgent says the atheist point is always, I'm better than you because I hate God, but they never know why. It really is. I feel like for the vast majority of people, I feel like very few people try to wrestle with reality and they try to genuinely question. I think that for most people, it's like a social status thing where they want to like fit in academia or in certain social circles online, and that's why they end up adopting atheism. It's like a midwits rebellion against what they perceive as a colonialist Christian upbringing, rebelling against your parents kind of shit. Gimmo says, why do they all clap for the nigga that they just voted out? Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to fit in with the Groypers. That's why I became a Nazi. Let's go. People like their sin and are too proud to change. Absolutely. It's very easy to do things you like. 110%. Yo, Joe is so goated. I've been listening to the new album a lot. The Crux. It's called The Crux. Tylerism. Lives are just adulting adolescents who haven't figured it out yet. Kind of true. Kind of true. This is who you're A-logging, says Dalton, bruh. Cue the storm, says the aliens have taken over the streets. No one is safe. The Democratic Party is launching a $20 million initiative to regain support from young men. The campaign, titled SAM, Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, aims to analyze the language patterns young men use in viral online content to appeal to them. Dude, are Democrats going to start saying the N-word? Are Democrats going to start blasting N's? That could win me over. Word says Daily Wire can't even own blue-haired college SJWs anymore without their obvious grift and sophistry being called out. Why won't they take a serious debate on Israel or sit down and talk with the woke right? Because they'd lose. Keep making woke TikTok reaction slop, bub. Straight up. W-words. AI-controlled bot farm. Hundreds of them tossing thousands of comments and postings. Designed to agitate you, polarize you, offend you, disempower you. Kind of true. I mean, like, these bot farms aren't being used to like troll people, but they are being used to control conversations. W Sommerquest. I appreciate that, Fart Blaster. Feel like Fart Blaster, powerchat.live/Tyler Russell if you're hanging out. Let's hit the goal. Let's get power chatting it up if you haven't already. Tyler, taxes due.
What's your name?
Brian. So the first thing I would like to say is I would like to engage in this discussion in a symbiotic manner. I would not like to engage where there is one clear winner and one clear loser. Emotions are activated and it ultimately comes about ego. So I'm just saying I'm really trying to understand.
Gitmo says, not gonna lie, I've noticed guys push back against the red pill and misogyny stuff more these days. They think it's corny. I mean, I have to a certain extent. I think it is corny. Not the truth aspect of it. Like, a lot of the red pill misogynist stuff is 110% true. Like, about woman's nature, about the social impact of feminism, about how women control the household, they control men, their husbands, boyfriends, whatever it is. All that is absolutely true. Pair bonding, body count stuff, like all of it is true. But the manosphere has become corny because of the way that the influencers act. And they all try to be Andrew Tate, but they're like complete fucking nerds and like they aren't cool and they're just total dorks who are trying to grift. And that makes it uncool. And I think that that's the part that people have to push back on. You know, like, okay, I actually have a really good example. I saw it this weekend. I was talking with somebody about it. There was this TikTok, and it's this guy, and like clearly, like midwit IQ, very average, just like nobody special, not very good looking, not very good hygiene. You can tell his hair is a little bit greasy and stuff, you know. And he's on TikTok, like going at, like simps or whatever. Like he's talking about, oh, how like you can't simp, you just gotta like bang the girls, like that whole thing. Don't talk to girls, just like bang them. And it's like, okay, dude, you don't fucking get it. And like, you don't even realize that you're simping. Like when Nick says that you have to be indifferent, that is like the true misogynistic red pill, is to be completely fucking indifferent. If you feel the need to go on TikTok and prove to everybody how based and red pilled and misogynist you are by talking about banging chicks, like you have missed the point of all of that information, what that was supposed to convey to you. You are simping. You are controlled by women. You are controlled by pussy, okay? The point is to be indifferent. And, you know, if you get married, if you get a girlfriend, whatever, it's like that is a part of life. Obviously, you want to have kids, but you can't let it control you to the point where your entire life is consumed by the pursuit. Insurgent says, imagine being a slave to strange puss and thinking you're in charge of yourself. Yeah, like, so that's kind of what the manosphere has devolved into. It's just like pickup artistry now. And that's the corny aspect. When it first came around, it's like, yeah, like the red pill on women, that's 110% true. Being misogynistic, yeah, you have to be. That is true. These things are all reality, but so many people have taken that and they've just spun it into pickup artistry, and it's turned incredibly fucking corny. And then you get these guys on TikTok, like I said, the example I just gave, and they'll pull up in a Lambo that they fucking rented from Turo to make these videos, and it's like, fuck you, dude. Like, just be normal. Like, part of the real manosphere red pill is being indifferent and normal about it. If we want to make these things normal, if we want to normalize misogyny and the red pills that we've learned through the manosphere, you have to embody that in a normal way. You can't be like some greasy incel chud freak on TikTok screaming about how you're banging all these girls. Like, you are still letting pussy control your mind. You need to be completely indifferent, and you got to get married and have kids, but don't fucking go on the TL and post your wife's fat fingers with a $700 ring on it, okay? Like, keep that shit to yourself, get some motion, and be completely indifferent. There's my rant. But yeah, to me, that's what it comes down to. It's become super corny because of people who have turned it into pickup artistry rather than internalizing the woman pill, the woman question. You have to be like Dalton. That's the true red pill. Daltonism. We all have to embrace Daltonism. I feel like there is just a big pushback against the anti-feminist rhetoric that has been so successful these past few years, especially on TikTok. Like, people are majorly simping. I constantly see niggas worshiping women in the comments section, for sure. And like, again, that's another part of it, right? People like push back against feminism by claiming trad. If you look at all these trad people, who are some of the biggest fucking simps out there? It's the trad ones. It's the new trad cats. And they simp over women and they go online, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with my wife. We're gonna get married. It's like, okay, so you just like didn't fucking learn anything. You can't go full trad with it, and you can't go full libtard feminist with it. It's like, both are the exact same. You got to remove that from your decision making. You need to understand the facts, gain the knowledge, and then remove all of the feminist worldly shit from your the way that you think, your mindset. Another side of the same coin, exactly. And like, obviously, like, you're going to get married. You will get married. You'll find a girl that you love, okay? You're going to find a girl that you love, and you're going to get married, and you're going to have kids. But when you go online and you're like, everybody look at me, I'm getting pussy, it's like, bruh. Or you go online and you have to prove to everybody how based in trad and red-pilled you are by posting your wife wearing a veil or whatever. It's like, okay, you're just like a simp. You are letting that control your mindset. But Tyler, she makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Can't let it control you. Can't do it. Okay, I gotta get a drink. My throat is dry. I've been yapping. Give me one sec, chat. Powerchat.live/Tyler Russell. Let's get some power chats rolling here, okay? Power chat it up. You can't get away without paying your Tyler tax. Tyler tax is due. Give me one sec. I gotta go get water. I'll leave this playing, though.
Understand your position, and I would just like you to really try to understand my position.
Deal.
Okay, sounds good. With that, if you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That's a way of defining it, yes.
Okay.
That's right, that's good. So I would say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting, because I would say, by definition, God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. That's a definition, right?
Okay, if there is a God, what is the purpose of life?
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary, upward, self-sacrifice so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
So you're trying to make it to heaven and avoid hell?
Yes, that's a good way of thinking about it.
What is the purpose of heaven? Do you understand?
Well,
so here's the deal.
At minimum, it's the opposite
infinite
of endless suffering. How about that?
Okay, and so should we not try to achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth? And if we can achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth without God, avoiding it, if we can do that without God, then does that defeat your claim?
Well, yeah, except that it doesn't. You circumvented my initial definition, because I said that by definition, God was the unified source of morality. And so if we engage in a moral exercise...
And when you're talking about morality, though, when you really reverse engineer it and you get it down to its root, you're a psychologist, it really seems like it just has to deal with motivation. People are saying there is a God,
It's more specific than that.
Well, so let me ask you this. So if there is a God and there is a moral code and it doesn't come at your benefit, are you going to follow it?
It depends on how you define your benefit. If
it's going to come at your expense, would you still follow it?
Expense.
If God came down and said, here is my moral code and you should follow it, but even if you follow it, you are still going to end up in hell, are you going to follow it?
Well, that was the question that was put to Job and to Christ, right? Because they were required, hang on, I'm answering your question. They were required to withstand trials that would break anyone and maintain their upward orientation regardless.
And they did that with the motivation of believing that this omnipotent, all-loving God would somehow turn it into a benefit. So they still did it solely for their benefit. So yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Hang on. Let's define benefit. Like, if I did something for your sister, would that be to your benefit? Like, how are you defining your benefit? Do you mean one of your whims gratified now? Or do you mean you and everyone you love and know over some reasonable span of time? Like,
so
what do you mean by
when you're talking about whims, I think you're talking about something that's more dopamine. When you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that's more serotonin and more ultimately satisfying. So you and I agree on a lot. I mean, when it comes to talking about how men should be masculine and things of that nature, you and I are 100% in agreement. We just don't agree on the justification that God is the only thing that provides morality.
It's not a justification, it's a definition.
What's the difference then between a definition and a justification? I mean, it's ultimately psychologically the same thing.
Well, we have to define what we're talking about before we can debate.
Okay, well,
right?
so here's my position.
I said that God, among other things.
I'm actually a non-theist. I'm not an atheist. I believe the human condition is one of uncertainty. And what that means is that I don't believe that you can conclude there is a God with certainty, and I don't believe that you can conclude that there is a God without in the same position. Now, with that, I don't care. I still wake up every day, and I have motivation to be a moral person.
Define moral.
Moral, what I ought to do.
Okay, and how do you come to that conclusion?
And what I ought to do, ultimately, it comes down to what not just benefits me, but what benefits the entire planet, what benefits the entire system. I think that your entire moral perspective comes from linear thinking, and when you look at the reality of the universe, it's actually more so holistic. So when you look at how Aristotle defined God, when he said that there had to be an unmoved moved or an uncaused cause, he was defining God from a linear perspective, and you do the same with morality, and you do the same with purpose.
How does my definition of morality? How does my definition of morality hypothetically differ from yours?
Because you're saying that there's something that exists in a vacuum, that it exists in and of itself, and nothing in the universe exists in a vacuum. Nothing exists in and of itself. It's a whole systems-based morality. It's a systems-based reality.
Is there a hierarchical
and that is
structure?
What the quantum.
Is there a hierarchical structure? Are some things more important than others?
Are some things, I think some things lead to more benefits than others.
Then, by your own definition, some things are more important than others.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
what is
pause there. You've been voted out by the majority.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I guess since you said morality and purpose cannot be found in science, it would just depend on like what you're referencing. If you're saying a description of your psychological preferences would be considered within science, sure. But I don't think that you have to say that it comes from science in order to be like an atheist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know if God exists and I don't believe that a God exists. And the only ones that I would really reject would be like the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, perfect notion of God that plenty of Christians like prescribe themselves. So I guess.
How is that relevant to this claim?
You're basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
what typical Christians?
Yeah, typically when I talk to Christians, they say that they believe in an all-knowing.
How about Cardinal Newman, who defined God as conscience? He's a major influence on all of Catholic social theory. How about that Christian?
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
Back.
That's the circular definition. What do you mean when you say you believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right. So if you believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it and you die for it. That's what I mean by that. It isn't something that you say. It
Like
isn't something that's
Groyperism.
associated with logical
You live for it and
consistency.
you die
It's not
for it.
declarative. It's not propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So then,
How would you define belief? Something you say?
Can I explain? Like, I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your life?
Don't be so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't lie to save my clinical practice.
Well,
Would you lie,
I
lie to like save your
mean-
children, your mom, your dad?
Well,
save
I don't know about that, Jordan
Can
Peterson.
there ever be a circumstance logically that
So he's
lying
just
could
retarded?
save
So
someone?
he's
yeah,
just-
and if you're
he's been
steeped in
tricked into
sin,
being
you're
a
likely
dog
to live in
slave?
circumstances like that.
I'll give you an example. If you're like in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic, and you're trying
I
to
know
protect
the
them,
example.
would you lie to like the Nazis? If
I
they're
would have
asking?
done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation
you
to
lie?
begin with. It's a hypothetical, and it's
You
not
can't answer
answerable.
hypotheticals.
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like
What?
that because
Did
it's
you eat
far.
today?
Look,
Did you eat
don't
today?
play games.
I'm not playing a game. I'm just
Yes,
asking if you
you
ate
are.
it.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you
Hypothetical?
I would do everything that I could to make sure that
He
I'm
gets so
never
triggered.
in that situation. By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about, like there could be a Jewish friend that you have, and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them in
give
your
up on
attic.
that line of questioning.
Give up on just like trying to clarify your position? Because
I
you don't
did
like, are you like
clarify.
uncomfortable with me asking this question? It's just a basic hypothetical. Like I could ask
It's
you.
just a basic
Yeah, yeah.
hypothetical
Like,
where
like
you
if you-
put Jews' lives at stake in Nazi Germany. That's just a basic hypothetical.
Obviously, you would lie in that scenario to save their life, but you're like not trying to answer this question for some reason.
I just told you why.
Are you anti-fascist? Like, so you're
Why
anti-fascist?
are you asking that?
I was just asking, just clarifying. But like, okay, again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to save
I'm
someone's life.
answering it in
Obviously,
a
that's not
manner
what
you
truth
don't
is.
find acceptable.
Obviously, because I care about
you're-
truth.
I wouldn't be in that scenario.
Obviously, right? Logically, because that's
No.
already happened. Like that's in the past. You don't have a time travel device. We're bringing this logical hypothetical up to show you that in some circumstances that do happen within the real world, you would lie to save people's lives. So your definition of truth isn't actually how we're typically using it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to muddy the waters when I ask you, like, do you believe this? Do you think this to be true? So you don't actually have to answer the questions. And plenty of Christians don't like that because they clearly see that you don't really like want to be associated with
I can
Christianity with that
imagine
respect.
that I was in a situation where the best I could do as a consequence of my previous mistakes was to tell the least amount of lie I could manage. But that would likely indicate that I had made all sorts of catastrophic errors on my way there.
So
Right.
you would lie to save someone's life. So again, you do believe it to be true in that circumstance, even though you like lied in that scenario. So
Not
clearly that's
without
not what
the
you see to be true.
context that I put it in.
You were not willing to
I
die for it. You
said-
were not willing to let other people die for it. So that's not what you see to be true then, seemingly.
You're doing exactly what I said you were doing at the beginning of the conversation. You're generating an impossible, restricted, hypothetical.
Yeah, wait, does bro
with
dye
no
his
precursors
eyebrows? Why
to
is his
back you into a
eyebrows
corner.
Possible. Is there
full
something
color?
contradictory
but-
about it? Nice to meet you.
Why are his eyebrows full color, but his beard and his hair is gray? Does he just dye them? He dyes his eyebrows?
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Yeah. My next claim is that everybody worships something, including atheists, even though they might not know it.
Oh, they're gonna rush for that one. Yup.
Hi.
Good work.
Thank you.
Hi there.
I'm Zena. So I want to start off with like defining terms.
Yep.
How do you define worship?
Prioritize.
Prioritize. So almost like having a preference over something rather than the
It's a
other.
hierarchy of preferences.
Yeah.
And you use it to direct your attention.
Right.
So whatever you're attending to, you're worshiping.
Right. So I've kind of become a little bit familiar with your idea of like this value-laden hierarchy.
Yeah.
Right. And
Get ready for a
you
semantic
kind of
game about
posit that at
worship.
the bottom
Uh-huh.
of this
Yeah,
hierarchy,
we all know where
you
that's
call it top
going.
or bottom, I suppose. At the bottom of this hierarchy, this foundational priority in your life is going to be considered God.
That's
is that
right.
correct?
Yes.
Right. I'm trying to imagine a situation in which could there be that someone has a priority at their foundation that is different from someone else's?
Oh, definitely.
Right. So we can have different conceptions of God.
That's why we fight.
Right. So essentially, there's not one God, but there are multiple gods, and these gods exist in some realm of truth. It's true that this person has one God, and it exists.
Yeah, probably better to think about it as multiple values, but that there's a hierarchy of values with something at the bottom.
Right, but at the bottom is God, and
that's a definition. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the bottom is God, and there can be multiple people with different conceptions of God, and they're each valid in being called God. So there are multiple gods that exist.
It depends on what you mean by valid. So far, so good, but it depends on what you mean by valid, because I would say that some foundational conceptions don't play out when they're implemented. So if you put the wrong thing at the foundation, you end up in hell, for example. That's what happens in totalitarian states.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying...
So they're not all equal. Like, all foundational principles are not equal, even though they might be equally foundational. Right.
So what makes one kind of foundational tenet better than another one?
She's shiny. All the black people are really shiny.
Iterability. Imagine that you play a game with someone and you're a kid, and it's fun. So then you play again and again and again.
So repetition.
It's playability across multiple iterations. So then you have a friend, and a friend is better than having a game. So that's one. Breadth of application is another. So if it's just for me now, it's not as good as something that would be benefit to both of us across time.
Right. So we're explaining characteristics that can be applied to these types of foundational values. But why is it that this iterability makes it better, and what does better mean?
Well, one hallmark of better is likely to be selected voluntarily.
Right.
So it's invitational.
Another descriptive kind of quality. So we're talking about characteristics that in some type of system with a goal, an output being we could maybe say happiness, right? Or some type of
harmony.
Harmony, right?
Yeah, that's better. Not happiness precisely, because it's too short term.
Exactly. So as someone who is an atheist, right, I can explain that within a system, there are things that we can see as better or worse to meet this goal or meet this output. But what we're interested in, though, is what could make these things, regardless of any system, right?
Well, imagine that you set up a system and you implement it, and it produces the opposite results to which you intend. Oh yeah, that's not a good system.
Exactly.
Right, so the foundational principles are lacking, because when you implement them, the game degenerates instead of moving towards the aim.
Right, so we're talking about within a system. When we talk about something being moral, right, just absolutely moral, it means that without a system, right, this thing is simply moral with no reason. Stance independent, this thing is good. So I'm trying to figure out if such thing can exist. And if so, do you believe that these things are moral in of themselves, self-evidently moral, or are they moral in accordance with the system?
I can't define them any more accurately than I already did, really.
Okay. In regards to morality, when we talk about the divine, when we talk about God and religion, these moral tenets and religion, right, and God exists as good because it is God, right? So it's self-evident, right? Without any kind of goal or output, this thing is good. So I want to figure out how...
There's an element of that that's true. So, for example, in the story of Job, Job is unfairly tortured in consequence of a bet between God and Satan. And so Job is emblematic of someone who's being hurt for no apparent reason. Okay, so Job's response to that is that he refuses to lose faith in himself, and he refuses to lose faith in the ultimate goodness of being. Okay, and those are axiomatic decisions. They're not exactly evidence dependent because he is suffering. There's an arbitrariness in that that's reminiscent of what you claim.
So I'm essentially trying to figure out, do you believe that something can be good, stance independently? Something that can be good?
I don't know what you mean by stance independent.
Okay, so
you mean independent of people?
Independent of people. We can use that, or more so, I want to be more specific. Something that can be good, right, regardless of any end goal. It's just good.
No, I think good is tied up with goal.
Goal, okay. I completely agree. So, in a sense, this is why...
That's why the religious goal in Christianity is the establishment of the kingdom of heaven on earth. It's goal dependent.
Okay, right.
So it's in reference to a goal.
So,
or the goal would be the imitation of Christ.
Someone's goal, right, can be something that doesn't encompass being in congruence with God or being with God.
No, the thing that they want to be in congruence...
Oh, right, okay.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's good. That's great. The thing they want to be in congruence with is fundamentally equivalent to their God.
So what makes someone a Christian and what makes someone not a Christian? What makes like that's what I'm trying to figure out because
that's a good question.
Yes.
Yeah, well, probably the deepest answer to that is willingness to shoulder your cross voluntarily and trudge uphill regardless of circumstances.
Okay, so someone can have a God because in your definition, your first preference, that is God, right? So someone can believe in God, right, and not be a Christian, right?
Yeah, well, there's a statement that Christ makes in the Gospels. He says, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven.
So not that they're even saying that they believe in God, but they just...
No, but that's why I'm saying this to you, is that Christ himself points out that there's a difference between people who say they believe and people who act it out. And the fundamental issue is the action rather than the stated belief.
But he also says that, to be saved, right, you must believe God has died for your sins or that God has resurrected in some way. So it's like, I don't necessarily think that we can take from the Bible and say that like acting in accordance with God necessarily means, or acting in accordance with, the principles of God, like for example, sacrifice, like you talk about, means that you are Christian. I don't see how you can get that from that interpretation and then, kind of justify it as the truth.
I don't think that the fact that you sacrifice is sufficient to make you Christian.
So can we repeat once again what you believe makes someone Christian?
There's many things, but one of the most fundamental is that you believe that the cosmos itself is founded on the principle of voluntary self-sacrifice. Best founded. Let me offer you a contrary example. So I could assume that power rules. And so that my assumption would be, if I can make you do it, I win. Right, and I can found a whole society on that, and that happens a lot, by the way. And that's also how societies tend to degenerate. And so that would be a society that was founded on the principle that you get to sacrifice and I don't have to. Right, now the contrary to that would be something like you give up voluntarily and with courage all the things you need to situate yourself properly in relationship to the future and other people. Right. So then there's a harmony. That's why I talked about harmony earlier.
So you navigate your life, right, in accordance kind of to this principle of self-sacrifice. Can I say it in that way?
Yes, you can definitely say it that way. That's exactly right. And navigate is the right term.
So someone does not have to have any awareness of Christ, of the story of Jesus, but let's say 60% of their actions, right, or more, whatever kind of metric you want to use, are in line with this self-sacrificial.
So the Christian thinkers of the Middle Ages dealt exactly with that problem when they were talking about the pre-Christian philosophers, for example. And they noted the similarity, let's say, between pre-Christian Greek thought and later Christian thought, and presumed that there were moral actors outside the Christian domain.
Right. So is that person Christian, though? Is that person Christian?
To some degree, again, that's a matter of definition, because they wouldn't be proclaiming Christian propositions, but they're acting out the pattern. Right. So you imagine that full Christianity would involve a dozen things. And you can imagine someone who knows nothing of Christianity, say, acting out 8 of them.
Right.
So then they'd be 8/12 Christian or something like that.
Christian. Well, but to be like a full Christian, how can someone say I am
Tyler is locked in. LOL. So I was reading something on my other screen.
Well, I hesitate to do that personally because I think it's the kind of goal that you be very careful about proclaiming.
I have not been listening to this for the past 2 or 3 minutes.
Belief is not necessary. 8/12s or.
I was reading something else.
It depends on what you mean by belief. See, because I would say that acting out the pattern is the deepest form of belief.
I was in fact locked out, not locked in.
Now you could add to that what you say. So, maybe in the optimal situation, how you act and what you imagine and what you say, they're the same, right? But you can imagine a hypocrite who says all sorts of wonderful things and does nothing, and you could imagine another person who acts in a very positive manner but proclaims nothing.
So what I'm kind of seeing is like a descriptive, a really comprehensive but descriptive analysis of human action, human thought, and by which we can characterize people and put people in boxes. But I don't see...
Why in boxes?
Like, when I say in boxes, I mean like I can categorize you based on your actions, not based on necessarily what you say, but based on your actions that you are more so or less so Christian, right? Things like that, right? So we can categorize people as Christian.
Well, I would say more or less voluntarily self-sacrificing.
But that's also...
You're missing Peterson define Christianity without
someone
Christ.
Can be like 60% or 70% Christian based on simply just acting in that way.
Richard Dawkins is like that.
I watched that debate.
Let's pause there.
Sounds like I'm
Voted out
valid.
by the majority.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Really, very thoughtful.
Okay, here we go. Okay, this is the viral guy. So this next one is the viral one where they had to change the entire YouTube name because of this guy.
Hey, Dr. Peterson.
How you doing?
Danny, nice
He
to meet you.
owns
What's your name?
Dr.
Danny.
Peterson.
Danny.
You're saying atheists worship things or people or places, whatever. Can you be very clear about your definition of worship again?
Attend to, prioritize, and sacrifice for.
Okay, that's it. That's your understanding of worship.
Well, I could flesh it out, but that'll do for the time we have.
Okay. Do Catholics attend to Mary?
Yes.
Okay. So do they fit that description of worship?
Yes.
So you would say Catholics and other people that revere Mary, like the Eastern Orthodox tradition, worship Mary.
Well, they might not put her in the highest
But
place.
you would put it that way.
No.
You just said it. Now you're taking it back.
There's
now?
still a hierarchy.
Okay, there's a hierarchy, but within the
There's something at the top.
All right, you can worship things
Mary is
below.
quite a ways up the hierarchy, but not at the top.
Let's go over your definition of worship again. What's your definition of worship?
Attend to.
Attend to.
Prioritize.
Do
And
Catholics
sacrifice for.
What do Catholics attend to? Do they prioritize Mary over all other human beings?
No, I didn't say overall, did I? I didn't
Well,
add that to my definition.
you understand.
I said there was a hierarchy as well.
You attend to
So you can attend to something trivially, or you can attend to it deeply.
Okay, now you're adding stuff to the definition. But your original definition.
I added the hierarchy part at the beginning.
Are you
just
familiar?
didn't understand it.
Are you familiar with the Immaculate Conception?
Why is that relevant?
Because you go to a Catholic church, don't you? Or you've attended recently. You're interested in Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay, you're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are very
how do they
deep.
regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either
it,
you're a
'cause
Christian
I won't
or you're
talk
not.
to you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
You don't have to tell me. I was under the impression
private.
I was invited to talk to a Christian. Am I not talking to a Christian?
Damn.
No, you were invited to.
I think everyone should look at the title of the YouTube channel. You're probably in the wrong YouTube video.
You're really quite something. You are.
Aren't I? But you're really quite nothing. Right? You're not a Christian.
Okay, I'm done with him.
He got owned. There's no other way to slice it, dude. Oh, but you really are nothing, aren't you? It's true. Jordan Peterson is nothing. Like every single position he has, it all comes down to do whatever you like. He got owned. You kind of love to see it. You know, I don't like how it's some like lib shit r/atheism user who's doing it, but at the same time, it's like, you know, whenever Jordan Peterson gets put in his place, it's kind of like, yo, let's go. You are nothing. Wow, you're really something, aren't you? You're really nothing, aren't you? Like that's a banger. You got to give credit where credit's due. That's a banger, dude. That's a zinger and a half.
Hi there.
Hi, nice to meet you.
What's your name?
Gerard.
Hello, Gerard.
Nice to meet you, sir. So you've said
Imagine him debating
that
someone on
worship is
the
when
right,
you
you'd get
prioritize and sacrifice
obliterated.
for something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a hierarchy in there.
Sure. So I prioritize and sacrifice for my wife more than I would prioritize and sacrifice for a random person on the street, right?
Probably, yeah.
Presumably. Do I worship
I don't know.
my
I've
wife?
seen some pretty bad marriages.
Assuming a good marriage, are you saying I worship my wife?
I'm trying to define worship.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So prioritize and sacrifice. I do
the
those
higher
things.
it is in the hierarchy, the more what you're doing is akin to worship. But even in your trivial acts of attention, you're prioritizing and partaking in worship, even if you don't know it.
So I am
And it's
prioritizing.
partly, well, with regard to your wife, say. So why do you value your wife? You do value your
Yes,
wife.
I love
okay.
her. So I
Right.
prioritize and I
Okay.
sacrifice for her.
Right. So that's within the confines of love, let's say.
Sure.
What else does it serve?
What else does what serve?
Your love and your marriage?
I mean, I am married to my wife because I love her. That's
Yeah.
also why I prioritize and sacrifice for her. I certainly wouldn't think I worship her, and I don't think anyone else would make that.
I'm
Are you
trying to
making
make
that
a
claim?
definition.
Okay.
Yeah, that there's a hierarchy of attentional priority, and as you move up it or down it, depending on whether you think about it as a pinnacle or a foundation, you move more towards worship. Right, so even the small things, I'll give you an example. Imagine you go on a date. Well, imagine that your aim is a long-term relationship like a marriage. Okay, now imagine that your aim is short-term sexual gratification. Your pattern of attention is going to vary during the date, depend on your ultimate end. That's the hierarchy. The way that you attend to your wife is dependent on your ultimate aims, even if you don't know it.
So at what point is it worship? Because it sounds like you're saying worship is almost a spectrum, right? Or it's not a binary, it's not a
It's kind of like, that's a good question.
When is it worship as opposed to just, I love my wife?
The closer you get to the top or the bottom, the more it's more like
How
worship.
close to the top? Because I don't think I worship anything. And if you're saying I have to hit a certain threshold for it to be worship, it is possible I don't worship anything then, right?
It's not possible that you don't worship anything.
What do I worship?
Because you wouldn't attend. Well, love.
So you think I worship love?
Do you attend in consequence of love? See, I'm trying to define something. What do you mean worship? Well, I told you what I meant. What do you mean?
So I mean, something you worship is something that you have a reverential view for in a manner in which you believe it to be above and beyond normal things you like. Like you
so
presumably
do you have
worship
that attitude towards your wife?
I have that
attitude. Do you
attitude.
privilege her compared to other women?
Of course I privilege her compared to other women, but I don't worship her. Nor does she worship me.
By the definition you just offered, yes, you do. Because you just offered a definition that involved prioritization and elevation.
Well, and thinking that she is divine above and beyond what a normal natural phenomenon can be. Not other women, no, beyond any human being could ever be. I will prioritize her over any other human, but I don't think that she is some
You're
supernatural
making the assumption that only the thing at the top or the bottom has anything to do with worship. And I'm saying that's not true. It's a hierarchy of prioritization. And there's either something at the top or the bottom, depending on the metaphor, or you're fragmented and confused. Those are the only options.
So let's say
you're either going in many directions.
Bro's just making shit up. This is hilarious. I feel like he is. I feel like he is working out this worship theory just on the fucking go. I don't really think that Jordan Peterson knows what he's talking about.
So let's suppose I'm
just
fragmented and confused. Then you agree I don't worship
Seems like
anything.
he's just kind of twisting
then you
it.
worship multiple things.
And changing it.
So what's the threshold when it's worship, right? I prioritize
to
a lot
argue
of
against
stuff.
whoever's sitting in front of him.
The closer you get to the pinnacle or the closer
How close?
you get...
Can you give me some sort of metric? How close do I got to get to this pinnacle?
Do you know the difference between cheap literature and deep literature?
Yes.
Okay, that's the same issue. And how do you distinguish between them? What's the difference between cheap and deep?
I mean, it's really an opinion-based thing, right?
Is it? So it's just an opinion that Dostoevsky is better than a porno magazine.
Well, I've spoken to people who think To Kill a Mockingbird's cheap. It's one of my favorite books. So, I mean, people will differ on opinions.
Well, just because people are stupid about things doesn't mean that their opinion is valid.
That's certainly true. I agree with that.
Okay, well, do you think there is a hierarchy in literary quality?
I think that there is a hierarchy to an extent in literary quality, but I think once you get to a certain threshold, it is just opinion. Like, I agree. Dostoevsky is better than a porno mag, but is F. Scott Fitzgerald better than Ernest Hemingway? I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. Why do you think that?
Because of what a book is, what literature is. Dostoevsky, he follows what literature is the purpose of more than the porno magazine does.
Good. Well,
so it's about purpose and definitions.
Sure. Let me give you an analog then. Okay. The depth of worship is analogous to depth of literary significance. And the closer you get to what's deep, the more religious and worshipful your practice.
So
and maybe you don't know what's at the bottom, but something needs to be, or you're confused.
Well, so to use your analogy then, how deep do I have to go for it to be worship? Do I have to be Catcher in the Rye? Do I have to be War and Peace? Or
it depends on what you're seeking for.
I'm seeking to know whether I worship something. You've claimed I worship something, and I want to know.
If you want to have a deep and meaningful life, then you have to go all the way to the bottom or the top. And insofar as you're capable of doing that, because otherwise you'll be fragmented and miserable and anxiety-ridden and hopeless.
So I have to worship something to have a meaningful life. And
There's no difference between those two things.
Okay.
They're the same thing.
So if I don't worship anything, my life will not be meaningful, correct?
Well, that's the definition of nihilism.
Okay. So if I'm a nihilist, I don't worship anything.
That's true. And then you...
okay. Mm-hmm. You just said everybody worships something. I think you just agreed there is a class of people that doesn't.
Well, they're incoherent in their worship. And hand gestures like that aren't going to help.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Okay.
Look, if you're incoherent and fragmented and aimless, which is what happens if your objects of worship are unstructured and chaotic, then you're going to be anxiety-ridden.
MAGA is gay and Jewish, says Chubbs.
That's a technical argument.
But there's happy nihilists.
That is
how do you explain that there are happy nihilists then? Because you just said they can't be.
The mere fact that you state that there are happy nihilists doesn't make it true. Like, what's your evidence? How do you measure nihilism, and how have you associated it with happiness? And what's your definition of happiness? And have you compared them to religious people? Because if you do, by the way, it's clearly the case that religious people over the long run have better mental health. It's a well-documented fact in psychological literature.
Sure.
So your claim is just a claim. It doesn't stand on anything.
So you disagree with the claim that there exists even one happy nihilist?
I didn't say that.
Okay, would you agree there exists at least one happy nihilist in the universe?
It's not a question that has any
Bro
meaning
needs
as far
his
as I'm
perkies.
concerned, because it depends on what you mean by
Percocet.
happy, and it depends on the duration that you're trying to calculate over. Now and then there's probably some deluded soul who thinks he's a nihilist who's momentarily pleased with himself. But as a long-term strategy to deal with the future, to get along with yourself and with others, it's sadly
Chubb says, Tyler, I saw that video with everyone being Jews. The blacks, whites, mixed race shit have me crying, LOL. I'm glad that you liked it, buddy. That was a good clip. That was a great Jubilee video. That Jubilee video was way better. Dude, this one, it's kind of like putting me to sleep. I'm going to be so honest. I thought that this would be more interesting, but it seems like every single conversation that Jordan Peterson has, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. The atheists are just saying like the r/atheism talking points, and Jordan Peterson just running it in circles. Like, it's kind of fucking nonsense. And it's boring. So this one's not as good. I really like the other Jubilee video was awesome. This sucks. I mean, like, we got a little bit left. We're just gonna probably finish it just to see if anything happens. But yeah, this isn't the best Jubilee video. But the one that you're talking about, Chubbs, that one was fire. That one was my favorite Jubilee video in a long time. That was some good ass content.
That's why Nietzsche warned that when God died, as he announced in 1850, that people would be flooded with pointless, anxiety-ridden, hopeless nihilism. And that was what would attract them for example, to the false gods of totalitarianism, which is exactly what happened, because everybody worships something, even atheists who think they don't.
Aren't there unhappy Christians or devoted believers? So worshiping something is neither sufficient nor necessary for happiness then?
Well, terrible things can come your way regardless, and that does happen. But it's the case that even when circumstances become deeply troublesome, that how you're oriented makes a big difference. So I'll give you an example. So the book of Job deals with the issue of unfair suffering. So Job is a good man who has everything taken away from him in the most painful possible way.
To settle a bet, right?
With Satan, yes. And so he makes the axiomatic presumption that he won't lose faith in himself or in the spirit of being itself. And that helps him remain calm and forward-looking through his time of trial.
Doesn't he absolutely curse God?
No. His wife tells him to do that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good. My final claim is that atheists accept Christian morality, but deny the religion's foundational stories. Hi there.
It's very nice to meet you.
What's your name?
I'm Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Yes. So God says that you can own people as property. He says that you can beat them with a rod too. He commands genocide in Deuteronomy, in Numbers, and in Samuel. I mean, they have a goddamn baby barbecue in Numbers.
Atheism embodied in this fucking
all of this
goober, dude.
in line with Christian ethics?
No.
So then God doesn't fit within Christian ethics.
Well, the biblical library is a continuing story, and everything written in it has to be contextualized by the entire text. There's 65,000 hyperlinks in the biblical text. And you can take pieces of it out of context and criticize them, and that's what you're doing. But that's a mistake I think it's an analytic mistake because you're putting the cart before the horse.
I really don't think so. I think that if we say that something is Christian ethics, then I think that all of the books essential to Christianity would fit with it, especially
that
if it's
guy
like
is
the
not
main
a
character.
redhead.
When we're talking about,
I do not claim this guy. This guy does not have red hair. Okay, this is brown hair. This is not ginger.
So
how do you think you should deal?
That's
with
not
the
ginger hair.
Sure, because I feel like
that is brown. This is ginger. You see this? That is ginger, okay? That is ginger. This is brown.
like the morality, like I feel like Christian ethics, like this is kind of.
Look at his eyebrows. He has brown eyebrows. I have like basically blonde eyebrows because I'm a real ginger. This is not a redhead. How are you guys saying cope? This guy has brown hair. He has brown eyebrows. You can clearly see it's brown. Why do you think this is red? You guys have to, you're fucking with me. This is not red hair. He looks, no, he does not. It's brown clearly. Thank you, absurdity. Yeah, like what is this guy? That's crazy. He's not a ginger. He admitted to being Jewish. Well, yeah, he's definitely Jewish, 110%. It's clearly reddish. No, it's not. This is not red. This is brown. This is called brown hair. Have you ever heard of it? Have you ever heard of brown hair? This is brown. This is clearly brown. This is crazy. Are you guys blind? They make hair in brown now? Neat. See, Dan G just learned something, I guess. This is brown hair. This is not red hair. That's insane. You guys have like different eyes than I do or something?
I guess I just think it's like kind of an absurdity
How is
to say
this
that
red?
God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, but sure, well, we can go on my ethics. That's totally fine.
I don't know what you mean by an absurdity. What game are you playing with
Well,
that
I just think that it's an absurdity to say that the Christian God doesn't fit within Christian ethics, that like the Christian
I
God
didn't
isn't
say
like
that.
Christian
I
ethical.
said that the specific statements that you made don't take the context of the stories into account, and so that your analytical approach is faulty.
Sure.
Don't put words in my mouth.
Sure, then let's go through the example. Yeah, so,
Don't
and I
put
apologize.
words
So let's
in
go
my
through the
mouth.
example. So in 1
Very
Samuel
tough, Jordan
15:3,
Peterson.
God says, go and slaughter the Amalekites, slaughter the men, the women, the children, the infants. What's the justification for that? Is that in line
That's a
with
good
Christian
question.
ethics?
That's a good question. I don't really know what to do with the terrible, blood-soaked, saturated history of the human past. I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. I mean, what you try to do in your own life, as far as I can tell, is to conduct yourself in a manner that makes such things much more unlikely.
I totally agree.
We're all saddled with the problem of the catastrophes that got us here, aren't we?
Yeah, but this one was commanded by God. That's the problem.
Yeah,
That's
well,
what differentiates it from anything else, is that this one, it's God
do you
saying,
think that
go
there's
and
ever
do this
such a thing-
atrocity.
Do you think that there's ever such a thing as a righteous war?
I'm skeptical. I'm not sure. It would probably be situational.
Well, right, fair
Yeah,
enough.
but
I
this
mean,
one
people,
certainly wasn't a just war. The context for the Amalekite slaughter is that 400 years earlier, they fought one battle, which they lost, and God says, that's it, I'm going to wipe them off the face of the goddamn earth. And then 400 years later, he commands the Israelites to genocide their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. That's not a just war at all. And also, a genocide is not a war.
well, a genocide can be a war, but
Absolutely not.
Look.
The genociding of the Amalekites, the men, the women, and the infants, that's not a war. The infants aren't combatants.
look, I already said that it's very difficult to look at the blood-soaked past and to know exactly what to do about it. The answer I gave to the gentleman who is sitting here before you is that it's necessary to read a text like the Bible at all of its levels of analysis simultaneously. And there's a directional morality that emerges across time that has its roots in the Old Testament, for example, with its restrictions against murder specifically, that makes itself manifest in the Christian texts as the insistence on voluntary self-sacrifice as the foundational belief. That's a profoundly anti-violence ethos.
Do you have the belief in your theology?
Well, what do you think of that? Wait a sec. Now, redress what I just said.
So I'm about to address it, but I'm addressing it with a question. Do you think that God is by his very essence perfect?
You'll have to provide more.
Sure, just like maximally great in all like the great making qualities.
Sure.
Yeah, like flawless. Yeah. So,
okay,
so does a flawless thing change? Does a flawless thing reveal like more and better information over time, or would a flawless thing say, here's what's good, here is the absolute good thing to do at all circumstances in time?
Well, we know some of that.
Wait,
Tell
so
the truth. That's one.
That's totally fine, but presumably...
No. You don't get to skate over that. That's totally fine.
It's a straw man of my position. It's a straw man of the argument. So the argument is that God...
Wait a sec. You said find one maxim that's transcendent across situations.
I didn't say any of those words. I'm not sure what conversation you're a part of.
Don't be a smartass.
I'm sorry.
Seriously. I mean it. If we're going to have a serious conversation.
Seriously, I mean it.
Okay. Rephrase your question so that, because I must have missed it. I tried to answer it.
So in my mind, I guess by my lights, a perfect being doesn't change. A perfect being, if they're maximally good, maximally moral.
Does our understanding of the perfect being change?
Our understanding might, but presumably what the perfect being is revealing.
Okay, powerchat.live/Tyler Russell. If you guys are hanging out, support the stream with the Power Chat. Tyler tax is due on Memorial Day, on Monday. So if you've been hanging out, you got to pay your Tyler tax. So Power Chat it up. TT.
Well, I agree. How do we distinguish between that, though, at the human level?
How do we distinguish between whether...
Between our transforming understanding of perfection and perfection itself.
Between our...
We can only... Yeah, well, we can only see through our own lenses.
Presumably a perfect being would be revealing all of these aspects all the time, especially if God's outside of time. I don't know how a God who's outside of time is revealing different things at different times. That just seems like incoherent to me.
Imagine something that's perfect.
Sure.
And complete.
Sure.
Okay, and it's trying to communicate with creatures who are anything but that.
Sure.
Well, they're going to get it wrong.
Sure.
Okay, now wait a sec. Do you blame that on the interpreters or the phenomena itself?
So
like, for example, are you perfect in attending to your conscience?
Hold on. At the point in time when God is literally the one who created us, he could have created us in a way where we would always be receptive to these principles, where we don't have to go across like a learning curve where, you know, maybe we'll understand like thousands of years into the future, maybe we'll do it. Oh, also, if you believe in an all-knowing God, then free will is impossible because
wait a sec. Let's not go to that yet.
You threw free will into the mix.
Well, that was the answer to your question.
Yeah, and
you said, why wouldn't God... Well, you know,
it's
1,000 years of deep thinking philosophers would disagree with you. But
and 1,000 years of, or at least like the last 50 years of philosophers would disagree with you. These analytic philosophers, people like Graham Oppie make arguments about the incompatibility of omniscience and free will, that if God created this world, if he chose this world instead of that world, then he makes it causally inevitable every single action that you were going to make. If he made a world where we were just electrons in love, then none of this would have happened. But by making us in this world, knowing exactly what's going to happen in the future, it makes all of those events inevitable, which means that they're all causally determined, which means that we have no free will if you believe in an all-good God or an all-knowing God that made everything.
Well, have it your way.
Okay, cool. So then the free will theodicy fails.
Have it my way.
Fails for you. That doesn't mean you've disproved it. I mean,
you
tried to make
the argument.
Yes, you tried to make a case for a causally deterministic universe. I don't think there's any evidence for that at all.
Do you think that God could have created a different universe than the one that he created?
I have no idea.
Okay, so then there's going to be a double bind, right? So either he couldn't have done it, in which case he lacks a power, or he could have done it, in which case we don't have free will, because he chose this world instead of that world, making the events of this world instead of that world inevitable with his infallible knowledge.
I don't understand where you're headed.
Well, it just means that the free will defense fails. Like all this, like under your view,
if you want to have it fail, no problem. I don't know why it's relevant to the issue we're discussing.
Do you acknowledge that under your view, free will doesn't exist?
No.
Oh, then do you want to respond to the argument?
You'll have to phrase it more clearly so that someone like me can understand it.
Yeah, gotcha. So God already knows in advance everything that's going to happen, which means that by making this world instead of that world, everything is inevitable, which means that God's act of causing this world instead of that
Inevitable
world
doesn't mean determined.
It's causally inevitable if God chooses this world instead of that world.
Doesn't make it determined.
Causally inevitable means determined.
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely, yes, it does.
Well, have it your way.
Okay.
That's not the case.
You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
He's wearing a tie with a polo shirt untucked.
You've been voted out by the majority.
Look at this guy's fit. Look at this stupid fucking fit. What is this shirt? What are these skinny cargo pants with an massively oversized polo shirt and a tie that's loose? That's insane. This is mental illness. That's the Reddit mod swag. Yeah, this is straight up Reddit mod. Absolutely. 110%. Low-key drippy AF. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't think that is low-key drippy AF, actually. Drip police? Yeah, I am the drip police. That is retarded. He should, unironically, you should be going to jail for that. I'm not even, trying to be edgy. That is, how I would run the government. If you dress like this in public, it is that offensive. It is just straight up that offensive. I am the arbiter of drip. That is true. Okay, I'm done with this. I'm not watching anymore.